Welcome to Living Practice, a podcast that explores sacred moments and creative living. I'm your host, Ricky Horvatic. You may know me online as Starmoth Press. I switched back my usernames so that they aligned with what my former avatar online used to be, which was Starmoth Press, as I realigned myself to the value of self-publishing and putting art and writing out into the world. Every month we are going to discuss the practices that have contributed to my creative life in hopes that we can begin a discussion about what it is to live creatively. I'm also hoping to be able to connect with more people who believe in creativity as an interwoven part of our being as humans on this planet. So the first thing I want to discuss is the fact that it is November and we are all starting to look at the holiday season and the end of the year. I believe that the journaling and planning community, which I have always been on the edges of, probably do this sooner than a lot of folks, but one of the practices that I did for the first time last year was picking a word for the year. I chose moss, mainly because I had been noticing moss around my neighborhood and in places that I did not expect to find it. It's kind of a part of that paying attention practice, that little noticing in our daily lives that really lit me up at this time last year. And so I chose the word moss with the hope that I would grow and rest and stay nourished no matter the conditions. This felt important considering we were heading into what we all knew was going to be a difficult year. As we head into 2026, I am happy to share that my word for the year is curiosity. I think as we move forward into the future, that approaching our lives with curiosity is going to become more and more vital, especially with AI infesting the internet with videos and content that is getting harder and harder to discern whether or not it's actually AI. I also think that as we continue to have discussions with people who maybe aren't in alignment with all of our values, but are in community with us in some way, we need to stay curious and get out of this headspace of judgment. This is something that I do all the time. I make snap judgments, and it is something I'm working on both through my creative practice and my spiritual practice by trying to meet people where they are and trying to be curious about what they're telling me and where they're coming from, and seeing things from a different perspective. As we went over last time, I am in the middle of the artist way, or I was in the middle as of the first episode, and now I am ending week 11. I can't stress enough how instrumental the growth and the emotionally and creatively, I've grown so much through this process. I really can't stress that enough. And I'm having a hard time finding words for it simply because it has been so invigorating for me. I invite you to my YouTube channel. I have a playlist with my vlog check-ins that you can watch for each week. I will leave a link to the playlist in the show notes so that you can check that out. If that's something you're curious about, I highly recommend you check it out. And now on to the Tarot Diaries, the cards that I've been walking with during this time, this past 4 weeks or so, have been the Moon, the Ace of Pentacles, the Page of Cups, and the Eight of Cups. If you follow along on my Substack, you will be familiar with how each of these cards have impacted me. And I think that one of the interesting things that popped up, it has been in every single week so far, and I didn't really notice it at the time. I don't revisit the original essays until I am getting ready to record this podcast episode, and I want to go back and reread what I saw in the cards and what I experienced so that I can write up notes of the themes that popped up. So in the moon, we saw that the collage had the narcissus flower, and we explored the myth of that character and behind that flower. And it really came down to self-involvement. And I have recently been discovering the idea that being self-involved is actually incredibly egoic. It is not something, it's not the martyrdom that we maybe believe it to be, or maybe that our ego makes us think that it is. And when we look at our own reflection as Narcissus did, and we become obsessed with ourselves and become obsessed with the way everything impacts us and everything in our lives, we can end up drowning in our own self-hatred, self-vitriol, whatever you want to call it. This was an important revelation for me, and it is something I'm working on because self-hatred is a huge issue for me as far as my self-talk. I experience a lot of negative self-talk. The Ace of Pentacles particularly kind of threw me for a loop, simply because when you think of pentacles, you think of the earthly realm, you think of materialism. And one of the things that has been an issue for me has been the way that I spend money. It has kind of replaced my addiction to alcohol in a way, as far as like the quick fix. I don't want to say dopamine. I don't know if that's what it is, but it is like a hit of something that makes me feel excited about life again, instead of actually just finding that excitement or accepting the boredom and mundane things that come along with life. Because sometimes we're not always here to be entertained, and we need to remember that it is not all about us. So in looking at the Ace of Pentacles, I really focused on coming back to the senses and living life in the real world and experiencing reality. In the essay, I talk about the bagel class that I sign up for as a way to spend money and give back to my family, because I was looking for a class to take over the winter months to keep myself inspired. In case you're curious, I have not made any bagels yet. I don't have all the supplies that are required. I have to order them because I don't have certain things available to me nearby. But I am happy to report that I've been cooking more and I've been baking bread again. And this is something that has been vital to growing my sense of self-worth. And I think that it is a good reminder that sometimes creating things with our hands and creating something tangible in the world, and especially doing that for other people, is a gift. I find myself caught up in this idea that I can't let that be my vocation or my job because I am a stay-at-home mom, and I really don't want to get lumped in with the idea of the trad wife, because I don't think that cooking for your family or cooking for your loved ones is something that is exclusive to trad wives, but this is the reality that we live in right now. Everything seems to be coded in a certain way, and so I'm trying to come back to cooking and learning things about the kitchen in a way that is curious, in a way that is not judgmental, and I'm trying to not let my failures keep me from going back and trying again. In the Page of Cups, I revisited 78 Degrees of Wisdom again by Rachel Pollack, and imagination is what came up a lot. I reflected on my obsession with Harriet the Spy as a kid, on world building as a writer. I talked about the magnifying glass as talisman, especially in my fiction work. I believe the magnifying glass was an important item that showed up in one of my fiction installments for Letters to Imaginary Friends. I am currently writing Dear Lila, Refraction Road, and would love if you guys wanted to go check it out. I just wrote the segment about the Green Road, and it has a lot of quirky characters, and I write it in a meditative state, and it is more meditative reflection than it is like actual traditional fiction project, if that makes sense. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. I also talked about writing my poetry collection, which also sprang up from my daily walking with my dog. And I cannot stress enough that it all has to do with observation and the storytelling and associations that happen within my mind and imagination from the things that I notice as I walk around a very small town. I walk past the same things every single day. And so far, I've written over 50 poems about this. Originally, I released Forever Place as a zine project, and I'm very proud of that, but I'm actually going to take the poetry from that zine and combine it with the new poetry, and there have been even more poems coming through, and it is my hope to hire an editor and actually self-publish these things as a book. Finally, the Eight of Cups is kind of looking at surrender and acceptance. I wrote about how being a sober person is almost like coming back to life or thawing yourself out after years of being frozen and stuck in this place where the only thing that mattered was drink. This is huge for me because as a sober person, I tend to dwell on the past a lot and think about the mistakes and the time wasted in my era of drinking. And it's encouraging to look to the future. It's encouraging to look around and see the grass growing around me and the flowers and the bees and the butterflies. And now I'm looking outside and I see leaves falling because autumn is finally here officially. And I just feel very alive. So we have self-involved, sensual experience, sensual awareness, observation, and surrender or acceptance. And really, the through line with these cards is looking up, which has been kind of like my motto for the year as we continue to fall into the trap of the attention economy. And a lot of us are moving towards analog practices, which has been very inspiring to see. Working in an analog journal and taking analog notes and doing things by hand is something that I find to be very important, not only for my mental health, but also just as a person showing up in the world. And so look up and noticing has really been an important theme for me this year, and especially over the past month as I've reflected on these cards. And so I really think attention is the through line. I think that as we move forward, our attention becomes more and more at risk of being harvested against our will. And it is important for us to reclaim the sovereignty of our attention and reclaim the time that has been taken from us. In one of my essays, I actually talk about what can happen as what happened to me as a kid growing up just watching Nickelodeon and being too obsessed with television and too obsessed with the stories being told in television and having that be my only frame of reality to the point where I thought that I had to live in a certain city and I had to live a certain kind of life and I had to become a certain kind of person just to be a writer. These are the limiting stories that are basically putting us in cages and not allowing us to create our own future. I think paying attention is going to be our superpower. And so the most potent thing that we can be doing right now is retraining our attention. One of the ways that I am going about this is I am working on reading books, not just listening to books, which I don't have any judgment on. It's how I've gotten through a lot of texts that were too dense for me to be able to read through properly. But I am trying to sit down and actually read books. I am trying to leave my phone in another room. I am trying to not get on my phone in the morning time until around lunchtime. This is not always successful. This is not always realistic. Life comes up. There are some reasons why some of us can't be away from our phones all the time. My kids are at school all day. Like, I need to be able to be reached. That being said, I am trying to develop the discipline that is required to turn away from these highly addictive technologies. And so the practice that I invite you to for the next 4 weeks until the next episode is just spending an hour in the morning without your phone. If you already do something like that, go for a walk without your headphones or go for a walk without your phone. Obviously, only if that's safe for you to do. Consider taking a notebook with you instead and taking notes on things that you see. If you feel like you need to take your phone, consider leaving yourself voice notes. And that's where I'm going to leave you this week, with the idea of paying more attention and noticing little things in your life. This has been Living Practice, a podcast about sacred moments and creative living. I'm your host, Ricky Horvatic. I invite you to leave us a review or rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This is also available on YouTube or Substack, so whatever your preferred subscription method is greatly appreciated. If you have any questions, my DMs are always open. You can find me at Starmoth Press on most social media platforms and at starmothpress.com and starmoth.substack.com. Until next time, I hope that you guys approach the world with curiosity and love and creativity. If it's feasible for you, I invite you to donate to a local food bank because of where we are at in the United States. I hope you all have a good month, and I will see you next time.